always felt like I didn't really belong in my family. It was like I was an extra piece that didn't fit. My parents never said it out loud, but I could feel it. My younger brother, Henry, was their favorite. Everything he did was amazing, and whatever he wanted was important. Meanwhile, my needs were always an afterthought. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened when I went into labor. I got pregnant at 21. It wasn't planned, and the father left as soon as he found out. I was scared but ready to face it. I hoped that having a baby would finally make my parents notice me and care about me. I was so wrong. Around the same time I was preparing to give birth, Henry got engaged. My parents were thrilled. They threw him a huge, fancy engagement party at a country club with expensive food, live music, and special decorations. Meanwhile, I was waddling around the house, completely ignored. On the day of Henry's engagement party, I started feeling terrible. At first, I thought it was just discomfort, but then the pain hit hard and fast. My water broke right in the living room. Panicking, I called my mom, who was already at the party. "Mom, it's happening. I need to go to the hospital." There was silence. Then she said in the most casual way, "We're really busy right now, can't you figure it out?" My heart sank. "Mom, please." She cut me off. "I can't deal with this right now. Call an Uber or something. We'll talk later." Then she hung up. I just stood there, holding my phone, feeling like the world had crumbled around me. They weren't coming. I was completely alone. I had no choice but to call an Uber. The driver kept glancing at me nervously as I tried not to scream from the pain. I barely made it to the hospital in time. The nurses rushed me in, and I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, completely alone. No mom holding my hand, no dad pacing the hallway, no family waiting outside. As I held my daughter's tiny hand, I made a decision. I was done with them. The next day, I blocked their numbers. When they tried to call or visit, I ignored them. 3 months later, my mom called me, panicking. "Why has the bank frozen our account?" You see, while my parents had always ignored me, they never ignored my money. My grandparents had set up a trust fund for me before they died. My parents managed it until I turned 22, which happened just a month before I gave birth. With a lawyer's help, I finally did what I should have done long ago. I cut them off financially. My parents had been using my trust fund for years, taking money whenever they wanted, like it was their own piggy bank. They even used it to help pay for Henry's fancy engagement party. But now, the money was gone. When my mom called me, she sounded panicked. "Why is the bank freezing our account? Why can't we access the money?" I took a deep breath and held my daughter close. Smiling, "Ask your favorite child," I replied before hanging up. For a few days, it was strangely quiet. I expected my phone to blow up with angry calls, but nothing came. That's when I should have known they were up to something. One morning, I went to grab a package from my doorstep and found my mom standing there. She looked terrible, messy hair, no makeup, and a stressed-out expression. She didn't even say hello. She just pushed her way inside like she owned the place. "What the hell?" I snapped. Following her, she turned to me, furious. "How dare you, Victoria? You froze our money? Are you insane?" I laughed, feeling the anger boil up. "Our money? No, Mom, it's my money, the money you were never supposed to touch in the first place." She scoffed. "Do you have any idea what you've done? We have bills, Victoria. We have responsibilities, your father and I." "You mean Henry?" I shot back. "Because let's be real, Mom, that's who you're actually worried about. You can't pay for his wedding anymore, can you?" Her face tightened, but she quickly recovered. "That's not the point. We're a family. Families share. You're punishing us over a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I said, my voice shaking. "You left me to give birth alone. Mom, you told me to figure it out while you were busy hosting Henry's party. I don't owe you anything." Her eyes turned cold, and for a second, I thought she might hit me, but she did something worse. She smiled, an icy, cruel smile. "Oh, honey," she said softly, "you have no idea what you just started." Then she walked out the door, leaving me confused and furious. 3 days later, I found out what she meant. I was served court papers. They were suing me. Apparently, my parents claimed they had been using my trust fund under the assumption that I was fine with it, and now, they were arguing that since they had spent the money on family expenses, I had no right to cut them off. But the worst part? Henry had joined the lawsuit. I thought maybe, just maybe, he would be decent enough to say, "This is too much," but no, he was listed in the legal papers, saying that some of the money was used to take care of me when I was a kid, feeding me, housing me. According to him, I owed them for that. I wanted to scream, but instead, I called my lawyer. While I was getting ready to defend myself in court, my mom started spreading lies about me to our entire family. She told everyone I was greedy and ungrateful, saying I stole from them when they needed help the most. Relatives began calling me. Some just wanted to hear my side of the story, but others yelled at me, calling me selfish, cruel, and a disappointment. But the worst one was Aunt Lydia, my grandmother's sister. She was furious. "Your parents took care of you for years," she snapped over the phone, "and this is how you repay them? By making them suffer?" I clenched my teeth so hard it hurt. Making them suffer? They left me to give birth alone. Aunt Lydia. They didn't care about me, not then, not now. She scoffed. "Oh, please, they had an event to host. You could have waited." I hung up on her mid-sentence. At that point, I was beyond angry. I was done. If my parents wanted to play dirty, then fine, I was ready to fight back. I wasn't some helpless little girl anymore. I had my own lawyer, my own money, and most importantly, I had proof. Since I had been preparing to take control of my trust fund for months, I kept everything: bank statements, financial records, proof of withdrawals. Every dollar they took was accounted for, and now I was going to use it. I decided to countersue. I wasn't just fighting to keep my money. I wanted every cent they had taken from me over the years. When my parents got the lawsuit, they started blowing up my phone again. My mom's messages were insane, full of insults and, "How could you do this to your family?" My dad, who had been mostly silent, finally called. His voice sounded tired. "Victoria, let's be reasonable. We're your parents. You can't do this to us." I took a deep breath. "You did this to yourselves," I said. He sighed. "Look, your mom, she's just emotional. You know how she is. She doesn't mean it." I snapped. "Just like she meant it when she left me alone while I was in labor?" Silence. Then, with a much colder tone, he said, "You're making a mistake," and he hung up. A few weeks into the legal fight, my lawyer found something during a financial review. There was another savings account in my name I never knew about. When we looked deeper, we found out my grandparents had left me more money than I thought, a lot more. And guess who had been secretly taking money from that account? My parents. Not only had they been stealing from my trust fund, but they were also draining this other inheritance for years. And the worst part? This wasn't their money. This was straight up theft. My lawyer was quick to push for fraud charges. As soon as my parents found out, my mom finally snapped. She showed up at my apartment, banging on the door like crazy. "Victoria, open this door," she screamed. I let her shout for a while before opening it just a crack. Her eyes were wild, hair messy, face pale. She didn't look like the polished woman who loved bragging about Henry. She looked desperate. "Why are you doing this?" she hissed. "Do you want to see us homeless? Ruined?" I raised an eyebrow. "You stole from me, Mom, for years." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. We used that money to take care of you." "No," I said. "You used that money to throw parties for Henry, to go on vacations, and to buy things for yourselves, not me." She clenched her jaw. "Fine, maybe we borrowed some here and there, but we're family." "Family doesn't leave you to give birth alone," I shot back. "Family doesn't steal from you and then sue you for wanting your own money." Her face twisted in anger. Then she said, in a low, bitter voice, "You always were selfish." I smiled. "And you always thought you could get away with everything." And before she could say another word, I closed the door in her face. I knew my parents would fight me on this, but I wasn't ready for what Henry did next. His fiancée had no idea about the lawsuit until recently. She called me, and I expected more yelling, but instead, she said, "Victoria, I didn't know about any of this. Can we talk?" We met at a coffee shop the next day, and what she told me shocked me. Henry had lied to her. He told her that I had offered my trust fund to help with their wedding, and that I was happy to share. When she found out the truth, she was furious. "I told him if he doesn't drop this lawsuit, the wedding is off," she said, gripping her coffee cup so hard her knuckles turned white. "I'm not marrying into a family that does this." I was surprised. I never expected her to be the one with a backbone. A few days later, I got a text from Henry. "I hope you're happy. You ruined my life." No apology, no taking responsibility, just blame. I blocked his number. By now, my parents were trapped. The fraud case was getting serious. Henry's wedding was falling apart, and with their money cut off, they were struggling. Then, out of nowhere, I got a text from my dad. "Let's talk. No lawyers, just family." I stared at the message, knowing they were trying one last move, and I was more than ready. I thought a lot before agreeing to meet my parents. I knew it wasn't a real attempt to fix things. They were just desperate and trying to manipulate me into giving in. But I went anyway because I wanted to see them panic. We met at a fancy restaurant, the kind my mom liked. It was quiet and classy, probably her way of trying to keep me from making a scene. Too bad for her. They were already seated when I got there. Mom looked angry, arms crossed and lips pressed tight. Dad looked tired, like everything was finally getting to him. I sat down without saying hello. "All right, talk." Dad leaned forward. Victoria, this has gone too far. We're family. You're tearing this family apart over money. I laughed, but it sounded bitter. No, you tore this family apart when you left me alone to give birth, when you stole from me, when you sued me. Mom rolled her eyes. Oh, please, we took care of you for years. We deserve something for that. You had a child, I shot back. That was your responsibility. You don't get paid for feeding your own kid. She flinched, but I wasn't done. You took my money for years, lied to me, and when I finally took control of it, you tried to destroy me for it. You can't play the victims here. Dad looked ashamed, his eyes drifting away like he couldn't face me. But Mom? She was still angry. She leaned in, her voice cold. You don't understand. We needed that money. Without it, we're ruined. I tilted my head. Oh, and whose fault is that? Silence. Then she said, barely above a whisper, you are. I laughed, but it was an ugly, harsh sound. You think I should feel bad after everything you did? Mom slammed her hand on the table, making the silverware rattle. Some people looked over. I raised you, she hissed. I gave you everything. I stood up. No, Mom, you gave Henry everything, and now? Now he's left you to clean up his mess, just like always. Her face turned pale, and then, like magic, Henry walked in. He looked terrible, red eyes, messy hair. His fiancée must have called off the wedding because he looked lost, but when he saw me, his face twisted with anger. This is your fault, he snapped. You ruined everything. I crossed my arms. You did that all by yourself. He stormed over, fists clenched. You had no right. You think you're some victim? You think you're better than us? No, I said calmly, but I am free. His jaw tightened. You're nothing. You were never supposed to have that money. You were never supposed to. Never supposed to what? I cut in. Stand up for myself? Take back what's mine? You're selfish, he spat. A selfish, bitter little. Enough, Dad said suddenly. We all turned to him, and for the first time, I saw something real on his face, regret. This isn't her fault, he said quietly. It's ours. Mom's head snapped toward him. What did you just say? He sighed, rubbing his temples. We did this. We spoiled Henry. We enabled him. We stole from our own daughter and acted like it was our right. We left her alone when she needed us most. He looked at me, eyes full of guilt. I'm sorry, Victoria. That apology stunned me more than anything. Mom, however, was furious. You're apologizing to her? She hissed. After everything? Yes, Dad said, because she was right. Silence stretched between us, and for the first time, Mom realized she had lost. The lawsuit was dropped a week later. I didn't fully forgive them, but I agreed to drop the fraud charges if they paid back every cent they stole from me. It took years. Henry never spoke to me again. Mom never forgave me and still acts like I ruined the family. Dad tried to make things right. He sent letters, called on birthdays, but I never let him fully back in. Some wounds are too deep to heal. And me? I raised my daughter in peace. I built a life without them, and I never looked back.